Hi there, thanks for tuning in to Explainer Explains. I'm Nick and I'm here with Luther Blacklock, Master PGA Professional and inventor of the Explainer swing machine. And we just wanted to take a few moments just to answer some of the questions we've been getting from Explainer customers and golfers of all levels and all abilities about the golf swing.
Yep.
And obviously it's Masters Week, very exciting week for the golf industry and the golfing population. And we've had a few questions come through from customers and keen golfers about playing at Augusta and the sort of shots you need to play around there. So I thought we'd take a little bit of time to address those.
Yep.
So we've got a question from Geraint Whitelock who said, is it true that you have to hit a draw around Augusta, and a draw obviously being a right to left ball shape? And if so, how do you do it? Because he wants to know how to hit that type of shot.
It's a fascinating question, and the best fader of the golf ball in the history of the game is probably Lee Trevino. And Trevino was on record as saying that he didn't feel he could do well around Augusta because it was a draw spin shaped shot that you need around Augusta. So that basically, well, having said that, Trevino did have some top 5 finishes, but he didn't play many Masters.
And Jack Nicklaus did okay there.
He did pretty good.
As did Faldo.
Yeah, and both of those.
As did Dustin Johnson.
Yeah. So there we have it. We've got 3 guys that can fade the ball at will perfectly in those 3 that you mentioned, Nick. But if you think about it and you go through the course, and there are a number of fairways that you want to hold the ball across the camber, the wind, there are lots of reasons, or just the general shape. So the first thing is, if you're not good with your driver as a club golfer and you're looking for draw spin, then just go to the 3-wood. Simply because with 4 or 5 degrees extra loft, it just makes it easier. Tee the ball up a little bit, use a 3-wood, and there's 15 degrees on your 3-wood properly. Well, 15 degrees of draw spin turning, you've got 15 degrees closing down to say 12 or 11, but it's 11 or 12 degrees of draw spin. When the driver comes in, starting with 10 degrees, the 10 goes to open face, becomes 14. So although it says 3 on the bottom and driver on the bottom of the driver, don't always think that the straighter face club goes further. The shape is more important. So that's the first thing to do. Use the 3-wood off the tee to help you draw the ball.
Okay, and in terms of the actual swing itself, if you want to hit the driver or if you want to draw an iron, for example, what are the sort of things in your swing you should be looking at to...
Well, if you're looking for a draw spin shot and you aim at the flag, Nick, you invite yourself to miss it to the left. There's nothing wrong with aiming a little bit to the right of the target and feeling that the ball's going to come in from 1 o'clock back to 12 o'clock, okay? So draw spin is creative, and if you aim straight or left, you're going to cut it. So by aiming a little bit to the right, it's sort of asking you to turn the ball over. And it's not a question of changing your swing, it's purely, if you've got the ability at home to play backspin or topspin table tennis, you've got more than enough ability to play a fade or a draw. It's just a question of practicing it, not thinking you've got to swing it that differently, but just create the shot using the natural ability in your hands and your arms. And people forget to do that. They're so busy worrying about the swing. Well, let's worry about the ball, and you've got more chance of hitting draw spin with a bit of loft on the bottom of the club. Okay,
but perhaps take a couple of seconds just to demonstrate what that kind of draw release looks like, Luther.
Absolutely. So we're going to explain our swing trainer here with the weighted power roller, and because it's a long club, I need to flatten the swing plane a little bit. So there's a clue in doing that. We flatten the swing, which gives us more forearm rotation. So if I was to make a golf swing now and swing to the top, I'm in plane. Now, if I don't use my hands, my body comes forward and then the ball leaks out to right. You've got to have the courage, once you've made a shoulder turn, to release the club through towards the target or just right of it. Now, if you did that with no creativity, you just push the ball to the right. So it's a combination of the path of the swing going towards the target or just right of it, but not being afraid to let the club face rotate. You can imagine with a wedge or a bunker shot, you're playing backspin, lots of cut spin, whereas this shot, draw spin, is much more like a forehand top spin. So hopefully the viewers at home can see that when you load the shoulders with a driver, you're given forearm rotation. If you don't use it, it's going to leak. Use it, you'll be safe.
Okay, and of course you're releasing with the protection of good swing plane there as well.
Absolutely, if your grip and your posture are good. But even if you don't have an ideal swing, there's nothing to stop you whether you're aiming dart to Jim Furyk. they would still do what we did, hit a draw. They'd aim down the right and turn it over. So yes, the swings may vary, but when push comes to shove, a draw's a draw and a fade's a fade, you know?
Okay, that's great. And we've got another question from a Mary Jerem asking a little bit about putting on super fast greens. Obviously at Augusta we see greens at probably their fastest you'll see all year, and it's very unusual for club golfers, amateur golfers to ever putt on greens that fast. But occasionally we do in the UK, we go from putting on greens that are 9 or 10 on the Stimpmeter, and then we go on holiday to Spain or Portugal or to the USA,
Yeah.
and suddenly we're faced with
12
or 13 on the Stimpmeter, and we
Sure.
end up 3-putting all day long. So what can you do when you find yourself in a situation where you're playing on fast greens that you're not accustomed to?
Yeah. Well, Mary, it's a great question, and as Nick says, we don't always experience greens of such speed, but if you do, you've got to deal with that putt before you even get to the green. So the first thing you've got to try and find out is, wherever the flag is, make sure your ball is below the flag. And that sounds a simple thing to say, but Augusta, if you don't, even the best players can 3-putt, you know. So that's the first thing. Understand where the flag is and play it. So good strategy, that helps. Secondly, we don't get as much in this country, the nap or grain on the greens, but the shiny surface, being able to read how the grain affects the speed. And therefore, when the green's that fast, the wind becomes a factor. So these are things that don't relate to mechanics of your putting stroke necessarily, but they have to be managed. So, you know, get the ball the right side of the hole, read the break well, and get the grain. Now, when it comes on to putting, well, all you can do, I would say, is just watch Tiger next time you're watching golf on television. He's famous for the 1-inch backswing, and it's very, very deliberate. So that's the only thing I would say. Just really simplify, distill, make the swing. And when you have a very fast putt, you don't have to have a great stroke, because all you're doing is really just starting the ball on the line that you want. The other very basic and common tip that works for everybody, if you've got a downhill putt or a putt that is fast, just putt out of the toe of the putter. That does deaden the strike. So very simple thing. Don't use the sweet spot, about 1/2 to 3/4 inch towards the toe, and it'll deaden the shot or the ball as it comes out of the putter face.
Okay, and of course at Augusta we're going to see a combination of fast greens and major undulations as well.
Yeah.
So you've got the double whammy of speed and slope.
Absolutely.
What sort of things are we going to see the top players doing on those greens that they maybe wouldn't do ordinarily at a regular PGA Tour event?
Most of it mental rather than physical. I mean, these guys don't change their stroke as such, but they do. I know of a Welsh golfer, a very good player in his region, was a guy called Kim Dabson, and we were putting for the Welsh Open on greens that were incredibly crusty. There'd been a drought, the watering system, so the greens were like sort of shredded wheat. So he was practicing on the patio of the clubhouse because he wanted to find a surface that was faster than the greens. So he putted literally on a concrete path, and then he went on to the greens, and the greens felt slow compared. So that was quite a clever thing to do, I think, mentally. But yeah, I'd go back at Augusta. The question is, before you even hit the putt, where's the ball going to be? When, you know, that's the key. Because there are going to be some putts at Augusta that are above the hole that just aren't going to stop. And it was happening at TPC on 17. You know, guys were going for the middle of the green, bailing out to the middle of the green, and then had no option of getting the ball close to the hole.
Yeah.
It just couldn't be done.
So number one rule, do your homework, leave the ball in a position where you've got a chance of 2-putting
Yeah.
rather than above the hole where you
Manage what
gonna
you've got.
struggle.
Don't change what you've got.
Okay, that's great. And we've got a question here from a Lucas Forsey asking about Dustin Johnson at Augusta. Now, I think in the past we've both had conversations about this before, and we've both been to Augusta and watched DJ playing, and we've seen him in good positions and not quite close out. But obviously, last November, he had the ball on a string and really dominated that tournament from start to finish.
He did.
What changed?
I remember being at Augusta on the 13th, Nick, and I think it was coming towards the end of the second round, and Dustin walked on, played the 16th. He was 5 under par. He was in contention, and he had 6 holes left to play with 2 par 5s to go. And he got back to the clubhouse in level. He dropped 5 shots on 5 holes, and 2 of which were par 5s. And that's because, as we mentioned earlier, you know, when your wrist is that bowed at the top, you can manipulate and change the swing at full speed, So full shots he can do, but less than a full wedge, he's been susceptible. I think if there was a US PGA or US Open where he went down the first hole in the last round and took 8, having daft 3 chips, you see. So there was a weakness in his armoury, but like all great athletes, recognised it and changed it, and he put the work in, Nick. Simple as that. Recognised he had a problem and determined to get the ball under control.
It was interesting as well because I think Rory played with DJ in the Masters in November, and he walked off several shots behind Dustin after 2 rounds, and I think told media that he was so impressed by Dustin's wedge play, the ability to control distance and the flight and the landing of the ball as well in a small area. Yeah. And would you say that's been a major improvement for him in his performance on the PGA Tour and in majors?
Yes, because the thing is, distance control is about a combination of technique and feel. You know, it's not either or. You need both. You need good technique and you need good feel. And therefore, 5 or 6 years earlier, Dustin would have been damaged in his field because he's fighting the mechanics of the swing. He's resolved it. He knows how to deal with it, and that's why his distance control came back. But it was Hogan that said that you can't get consistent distance control without consistent trajectory.
Right.
So trajectory for the elite players, for all of us, but elite players, the trajectory of the ball. So the club golfer tends to hit shots where it's like a rainbow, where the high part is in the middle of the ball's flight. The better the player, you get a flat line trajectory where the high spot moves nearer to the flag. So the ball goes forward and drops out of the sky. That's the big change. And when you have that ability, the flat line trajectory, that's when you can control the distance.
Okay, and we've talked a little bit in the past about wedge play, haven't we? And in particular, a lot of amateur golfers and higher handicappers are viewing the wedge shot and the various permutations of wedge shots under, say, 100 yards as being gentle swings. But I think, you know, as we've talked about before, that's really not the case. Maybe you can demonstrate perhaps what a wedge swing
indeed
looks like, and, you know, actually how, not so aggressive, but how confident and authoritative that swing is.
I think if you ask many club golfers what is the hardest shot for them, and they'd say less than a full wedge. So let me just explain that, Nick. So I just go down the hand and make this into a shorter golf club, and a person's wedge swing will get to here, you know, because it's a short club, and he would release. So let's just suppose that this is the full swing for a club golfer. And then you say to the club golfer, hit the shot, give me a 3/4 shot. And they make the classic mistake of making the full swing at 3/4 speed. And they go into the deceleration mode. And what you have to explain to people is the length of the swing becomes 3/4, but the creativity of the release is still bold and brave and committed. So we don't see wedges and chips and pitches as gentler. We see them as creative and strongly played shots, but really from a short length backswing. So, you know, in broad terms, you've got 4 stations: quarter, half, 3/4 and full. And just understanding that, you know, what you don't want is a swing that is too long going back, including the small chips and the putts. So if there's a thing to take away from that, don't see, as you said, the short game is a gentle art. It's not. It's about conviction and commitment. And I think going back to Dustin, you can see that when he was fighting the bowed wrist, that made it a lot more tricky for him, whereas he's nailed it, and that's where his distance control has come from. Certainly not backing off the shot and decelerating like he used to, because in the old days he would decelerate and duff a chip.
Okay,
but
that's
great. Now he doesn't.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to answer those questions.
No, thanks again.
Thanks for sending them in.
Yeah.
You can contact us on Instagram, Facebook, all the usual social channels, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible. In the meantime, enjoy the Masters, and we'll check back in again soon.